Hi, Anna, Kat, Yusuke, Dimitri, Cheryl, Christina. I can see all of you. I'm so happy to see you here, and I'm so happy to all be together. This is another TEDx Community Hangout. Of course, we had one last week, and we will continue to have them on a regular basis during this time. I want to quickly introduce Dave Troy, who's also on the call. Dave, can you unmute and say hi to everyone? He's my special guest today.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you. So many friends here. Really excited to be able to share some things with you today.
So before we dive into our conversation with Dave, who is a misinformation expert and licensee of TEDx Mid-Atlantic, I just want to give some quick housekeeping notes, often, or many of them the same, some a little bit different. The first is to keep yourself on mute so that your dog or cat or any other noise from your house doesn't interrupt this very important hangout together. So keep yourself on mute and then unmute when you have been called on to ask your question. You can use the feature in this software to raise your hand and indicate you have a question. But another way to do it that we're going to try differently this time is to use the Q&A box. So the Q&A box is something that we haven't used before. We usually say type your questions in all caps, but that ends up in a quite frenetic and intense chat box with everyone in all caps. It looks like it's Kanye 150 times over. So we're going to try something new and say, ask your questions in the Q&A. You don't have to type them in all caps. And in the regular chat, you can just chat and say hi and engage and share your thoughts and your insights and your ideas. Another thing is, if you feel yourself typing something absolutely brilliant and you know it's special, please make sure you at least also post that in the TEDx Hub or somewhere where it can be preserved and saved so the whole community can read your insight and what you said. And finally, looking at my housekeeping notes, we're going to start off. Dave is going to do a little bit of a presentation for us, which is lovely for the first few minutes. Then we're going to engage in some discussion with he and I, and also our director of digital media and programming, Frederica Yosifov. So the three of us will talk a little bit, and then we're going to open up to all of you and have a really robust Q&A for at least 30 minutes for the second half of the call. And that's it. So with further ado, I want to kick it over to Dave to start us off. And again, so good to see all of you. Please keep coming to these Hangouts. We need each other and we need you more than ever. Thanks, Dave.
But perhaps to thrive and come out on the other side of it better. So Caroline, I have a technical question for you that we should have looked at a couple minutes ago, but how do I turn on screen presenting?
Oh, that's a great question.
I'm seeing all these little controls here and buttons, and this is new. This particular iteration of Blue Jeans is new to me. So, is there a way to do screen sharing?
Yeah, I'm going to find out for you in just 1 second. Why don't you go ahead and kick off? In about 1 minute,
Sure.
I'll be able to.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, so I think that, the question that kind of came to my mind as soon as, we really started to grasp what the full, situation was with this and how we should be reacting to it, the question that came to my mind was, what should we be doing as humans, first and foremost? I mean, obviously, we are a lot of things. We're business people, we're husbands, wives, fathers, children, and what is our primary responsibility to one another? And I thought, that's really the deepest question that we should probably ask. Because at the end of the day, the financial situations that we're all in, everything that we kind of, I think, took for granted for a long time is being, revisited right now. We're going to emerge from this in maybe a little bit different situation. So I think, if that's the case, then the only thing you can really look after is our obligations to one another. So thinking about how we as a network of, communities around the world can really respond to this, I started to think about some, things that, from my perspective as a, disinformation, researcher and somebody that's acutely aware of how information can be used to harm communities. It felt to me as though there was an urgent need to, really have a conversation about what we might do to mobilize around that need. So that was kind of the first question is, what should we be doing as humans? So Caroline, do you have a sense of what I should do to present?
We're still working
Right.
on it. Go ahead and keep going, and we'll probably share them for you. Keep going.
Okay, sure. So, I think the thing that quickly came to my mind was that, there's basically three um, key areas that I think that we might want to focus on. The first is, how do we keep our communities safe from harm? And, by harm, what I mean is that, um, there's a great deal of bad information floating around, and I'm sure you guys have already seen it in your communities, and it's being produced, for a lot of different reasons by a lot of different people in a lot of different languages. And, the intention, I think, with something like this is to, create division in society, to create questioning, to, make it more difficult for our, hardworking governments and organizations to try to address this problem. Um, and, I think that when we see that kind of harm happening in our communities, we have a moral obligation to stand up and try to stop it. So, my thinking is that the first key is to keep our communities safe. And, really be on the lookout for information that can cause harm. So yeah, that's this concept of keeping our community safe. And then we could advance slide one more, Taylor. There we go. So this is just some examples of stuff that I've caught in the wild, and you can see that there's a wide range of nonsense there. It's government conspiracy theories, people complaining about the panic, talking about Christ over viruses and infectious diseases. This is the kind of stuff that when it takes hold in communities, people tend to take sides around some of these issues, and that then creates networks of people that are on sort of one side or the other of these issues. And that's complete nonsense to have that kind of thing floating through the community. So I think that it's incumbent on us to try to, be the eyes and ears and try to stop this stuff. And the only way that we can really stop it is to collect a lot of it and try to figure out where it's coming from. With enough tools, you can start to figure out who's spreading it. And, you've seen, information online about the takedown of, various kinds of troll and bot networks that are pushing this kind of content coming out of multiple countries. I don't think it's, necessary to single out any one country or any two countries or whatever. There's a lot of stuff like this that's homegrown in different countries. And, the main thing is just to try to put an end to it as much as we can. So, that's what this initiative that, I've been working on with the Atlantic Council is about, just trying to trap this stuff in the wild and source it and try to keep it in check. So maybe we could go to the next slide. Next slide, Taylor. There we go. So the next idea is to really overwhelm the bad content with good content. And I think that, we as TEDx organizers have a special role in that in our communities. We're already trusted in our communities worldwide to be providing, trustworthy, fact-checked information coming from trusted people. And to the extent that we have that role, I think that we have an obligation to use it to try to produce content that not only counters any kind of disinformation that may be out there, but simply to overwhelm, the very toxic content with truly reliable content. And that can come in a lot of different forms. One of the things that you learn as you dig into the world of propaganda and, disinformation and misinformation is that, there's a very kind of methodological way of doing what's called strategic communications. And, that's really just a fancy way of saying, looking at your audiences, figuring out where they're at in terms of, their thought processes on things, and moving them closer to stuff that's, closer to truth and, more reflective of science and more, reliable information. So being able to look at your audiences and kind of say, okay, what would be good for our audiences to hear right now? Whether that's in terms of science-based information around this disease or, economics points of views from people around, dealing with the crisis that we're going to be, thrust into with this. It doesn't mean, sort of trying to force any one point of view, but you want to make sure that the information that you're putting out is, at least happening in good faith. It's being well argued from a point of, reasonable authority. And so I think, Freddie and I have talked about that, and we can talk a little bit more about that. But the idea is that the voices that you want to be injecting into your community should be good faith voices that are trying to help bring people closer to a true understanding. And, our ability to do that, even during this time of crisis, I think is actually quite great in that, we have the capacity to produce videos, even while we're on lockdown situations. We can reach out to our speaker community and say, hey, I think you've got something that would be really important to hear right now. Can you record, something, and can we maybe package it up in a way that gets out to our community and helps to debunk disinformation before it takes place, before it has a chance to sort of take root in the community, and also just to physically overwhelm it with volume. So I think we can talk more about that. I think that's an incredibly important role for our community to play. And, I think we can also innovate around, things like virtual TEDx events and that kind of thing. But that obviously is its own conversation, but I think that could be part of the toolkit. So next slide. Yeah, so the third thing was really keeping our communities healthy. I think that we as organizers should probably pay special attention to keeping ourselves healthy in terms of our mental health, in terms of our connectedness to one another, and really thinking about how we can sort of be the person that helps our community cope better by putting ourselves not so much first, but just making sure that we're capable of responding to this in a way that's really meaningful. So I was chatting some with Arthur Zards. I think Arthur's probably on the call. We can talk with maybe Arthur a little bit later, but he had some ideas about ways to keep this network well meshed around kind of not only our health but also the community's health, and really making that a focus of our communications with each other is thinking about how do we enrich our communities, how do we keep them feeling, I don't want to push towards like optimism necessarily, but, I think being realistic and understanding things and having toolkits, that's power. And I think if we can empower people, that's probably the best that we can do in terms of keeping people healthy. So, towards that end, I put together, just a basic WhatsApp group with the idea that folks within the community who are interested in participating in this conversation on an ongoing basis, can, link up and we can chat and, support each other. Since Summit, I've been running a WhatsApp group specifically around disinformation for TEDsters in general, but, also TEDx organizers. And that's proven to be a very fruitful conversation. And I think, we may either, sort of merge those things or maybe they'll continue in parallel. I'm not quite sure what we'll do. But if you're interested in this, if you could go to the next slide, there's a link on there, just a bit.ly link for joining that WhatsApp conversation. And I would invite you to, join, to share it with your other TEDx friends. We'll be circulating this, on the hub and stuff. This is, to be clear, not a TEDx official program. It's run by me. I'm doing it completely on a volunteer basis, not for profit. It's just really a very loose network of folks who want to attack this problem in this way. So, you're certainly not obligated to join all of that, but, the idea being that if you do want to engage in this, then I think that we can have a very productive conversation. And my personal pledge on this is that I will definitely see this through this particular crisis, and continue to kind of operate this as a crisis response. I'm kind of envisioning this as a global activation network, and that the first activation that we're going to have is around the COVID-19 situation. But that, as other things may emerge over time, we may, choose to focus on new crises or new things that we feel like are important. Or if somehow the world turns to be, stable and lovely again, then we can just simply focus on practices and friends and, try to have productive time going forward that way. But, that's kind of the vision that I have. And I feel like it's really important that we mobilize ourselves right now around this. And I think, this can be in addition to, not instead of anything else that TED's doing around disinformation and, that sort of thing. So, I just want to make myself available to the community. So I think that's basically it. I mean, Carolyn, maybe we could turn it over to Freddie now.
That's great. Freddie, I think you're on the call. Are you able to unmute and come on and tease a little bit about your refresh you've been working on with your team?
Yeah, sure. Can everybody see me? We're good? Okay, cool. I've never done this from my home before, so I'm a newbie, and I thank you. So Dave mentioned some of the work that some of the conversations we've been having. We did a misinformation breakout at Summit, and then that kind of launched into a process of really working across the org to figure out what sort of refreshed materials we could provide the community. And one of those things that we got to work on was a fact-checking guide. And we've spoken to some organizers about it already. We've gotten a lot of feedback about it. And I think that I actually piloted it at TED Women. And so we'll be kind of communicating with all of you really soon about its release. And this is something that we really hope that is really not just a set of sort of resources for you and your teams, but it's actually a set of resources for your speakers, and that this is something you can pass on to them, that your speakers really, as part of the conversations that you're having with them in the vetting process and the draft process, the script writing, the rehearsals, all of that from the onset, that the expectation and sort of terms of engagement that you have with them is about committing to these principles. And it's a very practical guide. It's, how do you kind of evaluate a source? What are your strategies for fact checking? What is, Wikipedia good for and what is it not good for? And so I think it's one of these resources that is, I think going to be useful for you as an organizer, but I also think it's going to be useful for speakers and for anybody who's really just interested in the quality of information out there. So take what you will from this. It will be publicly available, just like all of our resources. And we really hope that these resources become something that we stand for as a community. And I think this is the most significant new add to the resources in terms of trying to create great content. The fact-checking guide is something that we also co-authored with the curation team. Their research director, Nicole, has really started to kind of streamline and templatize a lot of the fact-checking processes. And, when we were talking about releasing these resources, we were hoping that we could actually do a hangout, that she and I could co-host a hangout at some point. I think with all of this upheaval, we got a little, sidetracked, but I think the intention is to eventually actually hold some sort of hangout with a member of the curation team to talk a little bit about what are the processes in doing this. As an org, this is something that I think the employees here are also really interested in how our curation team does it. And so we want to share that information with all of you and make this, these best practices something that people inside our organization, but also outside, and maybe even people who don't even, watch TED Talks might look to these as resources on how to understand what is a fact, what is not good information, and what is responsible framing of speculative, statements. that, there is a responsible way to speculate, and we just want to make sure that it's not something that people are framing as with conviction unless they have the facts to back it up. And in addition to, in the process of kind of providing this resource, we also started to look back at some of our other guidelines and resources. Nothing fundamentally will change in terms of, the content guidelines. Our tenets are going to be the same. But we started to look back and see how we could even make those clearer, more precise, more robust, and actually just give you a little bit of insight into our collective thinking. So with the fact-checking guidelines, we'll also kind of be updating some other resources in the process, but I think the most significant one will be this fact-checking guide. And I'm curious too. We've talked to a set of organizers about this already, but I think we all want to make sure that this is a resource that's going to be useful. So it's going to be iterative. We'll provide it to you, and if something needs further development, if there's a bullet point that's just not sufficient, we want to hear from you. And if it's not useful to you, we want to make it better. And so I think that hearing back from you, whether you have been in the program for 10 years or you're organizing your first event, we want it to fit and be useful to a wide range of you. So it's really important that you give us feedback, and then we can, adjust as needed. And right now the resource is only in English, like most of our resources. So I just want to, make it clear that, we really want to work on like what we're saying in this the first set of guidelines that we're putting out there, and make it useful to the community at large. Caroline, is anything that I'm missing to cover in this that you think that I should elaborate a little bit on?
No, that was awesome, Freddie. Thank you so much. I think the other piece is that we're getting this out to the community soon, and we're so excited. I think we can confidently say that we'll publish those soon, and really looking forward to sharing with the community. Thank you so much for that. I want to quickly, Dave, I want to dig in with you a little bit, and then I'm going to pivot to Arthur Zards about some ideas. Dave, quickly, I want to talk with you because I think you're really great at explaining some of the hallmarks of misinformation and some of like the red flags and how to pick it up quickly in the curatorial process, but even beyond. So I was wondering if you could go through some of those for us.
Yeah, so I mean, I would think there's probably two things you want to look out for. The first thing is that in this kind of a crisis situation, there tends to be when the crisis accelerates rapidly, there's kind of a little bit of a lull where you actually can actually operate and get stuff done because the disinfo people haven't like sort of filled the zone with garbage yet. So we're kind of in that spot right now. And what I would say is that over the next 6 weeks or so, you're going to see a lot of new kind of, divisive information coming into your communities that is going to be attempting to get people to believe things like that this is all a hoax, and that, you don't actually have to follow public health advice, and that you should just go outside, live your life as normal. There's just going to be a lot of that kind of stuff, plus God knows what else will be invented. So there's sort of the right now view, and then sort of the long-term normal view is that there's disinformation, which is information intended to harm people and harm communities, and that can come for a lot of different reasons from a lot of different sources. That can be produced almost always like in bad faith. Misinformation is information that does harm, but that may or may not be produced in bad faith. So an example of that might be there's a bunch of medical advice that's going around in the form of little text snippets right now on social media. And, some of that stuff is true and some of it's not. It's not sourced. You don't really know what's, where it's coming from. So, I mean, that's kind of like what's going on in the wild and a lot of what your community is seeing, and they're asking questions. I wrote a blog post last week about COVID-19 that was really just an attempt to be an FAQ for frequently asked questions that I was answering online. And that went totally viral. And so what that shows me is that there's an incredible hunger for factual, sourced information right now. And if you don't provide them factual sourced, information, the void will be filled with bad stuff. And so, from the curatorial process, we have a little bit different situation where there are a lot of people who are trying to get onto a stage. They're trying to get, sort of resume laundered by saying they've been associated with TED. And, we want to be obviously on the lookout for that always. But for right now, I think we have a special responsibility to, be looking after factuality. So looking for, is this person well referenced within the realm in which they are speaking? Are they participating in this argument in good faith? Are they just trying to be provocative? I would say be especially careful about putting, quote unquote, contrarian views out into the community without fully vetting them. Doesn't mean that a contrarian view might not be valid, but you need to put it through that vetting process of making sure that, that they are approaching the argument in good faith, that they are, referenced by serious scholars. It's okay to have different opinions, but it's not okay to be, maybe a lone voice in the wilderness that is intending to cause harm. So I think, those are all general frames that we should be thinking about. It's definitely a little bit the Wild West out there right now in terms of some of the information that's coming together. But I think that if we, put our collective effort towards, just pushing out good information, there is a hunger for it, and it will tend to overwhelm, people that are intending to cause harm.
I saw a question in the chat, Dave, which I would love for you to answer for all of us. The question was, do we have, or what responsibility do we have in this realm? Like, what responsibility do we have to prevent misinformation? What responsibility do we have to cultivate credible ideas? And now more than ever, given that our events may not be in person, and we are going virtual, we're going into a new frontier. Can you speak to that responsibility you feel we have as curators, as event organizers, as TEDxers?
Sure. So, I think one of the things that the last few years has taught me looking at, disinformation and technology and platforms and that kind of thing is, to really think deeply about ethics. And, we don't necessarily always think very much about ethics in the world of tech and, that kind of thing, because, it seems kind of a soft sort of philosophical, thing that a lot of people in engineering, are sort of trained differently in, and we don't really consider it. So I think ethics is really just about considering what your North Stars are always. And, I think that when we think about what the North Stars should be here, we have to put ourselves as humans first. That is our primary obligation, is to sort of fulfill our potential as human beings. And that's not only for ourselves, but, to fulfill an obligation that we have to our collective, being here on this planet. So I think when you put that North Star in place of saying, how do we respond, most ethically to this, I think that it's pretty clear kind of what kinds of things would flow from that. I have also tried to kind of ask myself, during this time, given, whatever talents and capabilities and resources I have, what should I be doing right now? What will I look back on in 20 years and go, I'm really proud of what I did at that time, during this time of need and crisis. And I think that, we all can just ask ourselves, what will we look back on and be most proud of? And, obviously we have real world constraints of, money, time, just mental energy. I mean, this is a very taxing thing to, be living through. And I think that, some of the ideas Arthur has might help us to, lighten the load a little bit and to be able to cope with this a little bit better. So, I would say to the extent that you don't totally overtax yourself and make yourself ineffective, give it your all. I think put what you can into it and try to make sure that when you look back on this, you feel good about it. And I think that we're all incredibly lucky to have each other and to have a platform that, enables us to fulfill that without having to go invent that wheel, because, it would be very difficult to go build what we've built here from scratch at this time. But taking that and the relationships that we already have and putting them to good use, I think is very, very powerful and relatively easy for us to do. So I think, we're in a good position for that.
I think so too. And I have one more question for you, Dave, and then I want to open up to Arthur and then the group. One of the things that you and I talked about in preparation for this hangout is how this moment could be transformative for TEDx. We really believe that here at TED, but I think no one can speak about it better than a TEDx organizer. And I'm just wondering, I think a lot of people are asking when this is all over, what does it look like? And so my question to you is, when this is all over, what does that look like for a TEDx organizer? And how was it transformative for an organizer in their community and the work that they do?
Well, so I think what's interesting about this moment is that it's actually really reflective of the time period in which TEDx was born. If you think about what TEDx was when it was first launched, I remember because, I was there with the launch of the program and, 2009, and, it was very much a big experiment. And, as you've heard multiple times, from the folklore, no one really knew where it was going to go. So I think that, what we're being sort of forced into right now is a moment of extreme creativity and experimentation. And, like all emergent kind of processes, you don't really know where it's going to go. We didn't know in 2009 that we were going to have this incredible global network of community of friends and of change makers that are actually, having effects on the world that are almost incalculable. Like if you think about, somebody like a Greta Thunberg, coming out of our community in some ways, I mean, that's incredible change that we've been able to affect. So I feel like that we're kind of at another one of those inflection points almost, and that the kinds of innovations and ideas we're going to be able to develop out of this, which we can't predict, could be really, interesting models for the future. Because, one thing that we were realizing with this is that as this crisis has affected us, we're not really quite as resilient as we maybe think we are. And, so how do we become more resilient? I've also been really struck by, all of the efforts that people are starting to make to connect with each other. I've gotten more phone calls from like old friends and whatnot over the last, week or two that, just out of the blue. And it's, I think because people have this inherent need to connect, when you can't do it kind of your normal day-to-day way, you're still going to find ways to do it. So I think, we're going to learn a lot from that. And the other thing that I've noticed that I wanted to, touch on was just that there's been an incredible willingness for people to kind of drop everything and help. And I think you see that in any kind of crisis. But, I've been talking to people, at MIT. Many of you know John Werner. He's working on an initiative with Ramesh Raskar, another TEDster, to develop an app with a whole bunch of people at MIT and Harvard that can track COVID-19 exposure if you get near somebody that's been tested positive, and they're going to do that in a way that protects your privacy, so the government doesn't have to track your location, which is what's being talked about in some places. So they're working on that, and I'm plugged into them. So if you plug into this network that I'm working on, then you can reach out to them, be part of that, and engage your communities in that as well. And that's just amazing to me. And so besides that, we've got people at Johns Hopkins that are interested in connecting. We've got people at Google. Amir, in LA is interested in engaging people from X Prize, the UN, the ITU in this process. And, so it's very much an informal network, but it's again, this willingness to kind of drop everything and say, hey, if we could collaborate globally, what does that look like? And again, I kind of think of this from the standpoint of, I can do a lot in my own community. And indeed, I try, but I can only do so much in my own community. By creating a global network and connecting us all together, we can then have leverage that is global. And I think that's an incredible superpower that we can bring to bear. So anyway, big picture thoughts.
No, it's important. I really appreciate that answer, and I agree with you on what TEDx can be in just a short time, and how different it can be, and we all will be when this is over, and we all already are. We're forever changed. TED is also working on an initiative that many of you probably know called Civic, where we're really trying to think as an organization on how we can be part of this global change and promote the proliferation of good and credible information and stop the bad. I want to pivot to Arthur Zards and hear about your ideas, Arthur, and what you've been working on in your TEDx world and community.
Pretty sure I saw his name on there, so.
And me too. We can come back to him.
Yeah, maybe he's figuring out his microphone or something. Oh, he says he's here in the chat.
Oh,
Do you want to speak, Arthur? I can see myself.
I think you might need to unmute, Arthur, and that might be your. Not yet. We'll come back to you, Arthur. No worries. I want to open up to questions because we have a lot of really beautiful questions in the chat. And we have one from Randy about how challenges bring people together, and what is your perspective on that? Randy, could you unmute and ask your question?
Sure thing. Dave and everyone, I really appreciate your focus on disinformation. That is not my strength at all. I just get upset and delete them. But the thing that's occurred to me watching the people in Italy and Spain and other parts of the world coming out on their balconies and applauding at night or singing together at night, and I'm seeing it in my own neighborhood here in Nebraska. People are coming together in this what's been an incredibly divided world. And I'm just interested in what some of the other folks think about if that's a possibility. I'm old, but I'm not old enough to remember World War II, but my brother told me about how people came together during that time. And so I just am interested in what people think about that.
That's a good question. Christina from Vitoria Garcias, I know, I think I saw a comment from you recently about what's going on in your area. Do you want to speak on what's going on in Spain and how you're seeing people come together, if they are, or what you're witnessing?
Yeah, hello everyone. Well, this is my 8th day of confinement. I'm a bit bored, as you can imagine, though I'm working pretty normally because I am used to telecommute, so this is pretty normal for me. What I see here is that people are really following the instructions of the government, and most of us are taking this very, very seriously. Like no escaping from home, not going out for any reason that we are not allowed to. Things are, in terms of the news that we are getting, etc. It's very worried. We are really, really worried about what's happening. We are every single day we see that the number of deaths are increasing. The number of people getting infected is still increasing, so we're in the middle of the curve up, and we don't know yet when it's going to stop. So that's a problem. We are really worried. So the only way that we have to be connected and to escape a little bit from this worrisome reality is to use humor. And therefore, we have memes all around. It's all about memes. I could send you hundreds, I don't know, a lot of memes about toilet paper, about being isolated at home. And the only way to express it is because in Spain, Italy as well, we are really social people. I have American friends living here in Spain, or friends from the UK or other European countries living in Spain, and all of them are always amazed by how Mediterranean people feel about others and socialize together. So for us, it's pretty normal. Maybe because of the weather, I don't know. It's pretty normal to gather outside the houses, and this is maybe the reason why we gather in our balconies through our windows. And we connect to each other by applauding every day at 8 p.m. So At first, it was because we wanted to thank the health system, and it's the only way for us to be all together. So we go outside to our windows, to our balconies. We go together with our kids. Everybody in the houses go to our windows and start clapping. We clap for around 2, 3, 4 minutes. Every day, the number of people going to the balconies is increasing. Every day, the amount of time that we are clapping is increasing. And every day we really get overwhelmed by the fact, what's that, Randy? I can see it. I can't read it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Randy, can you unmute and share what that is?
Those are people in a neighborhood in Lincoln that stepped outside, and you can see that they're separated.
Oh, yeah.
And they're playing
separated,
instruments and singing together.
They're playing the guitar, right? Yeah, this is more or less the same. So here, people who knows how to play the guitar, they go to their balconies, they start playing the guitar, so other people can follow them, etc. People who knows how to, I don't know, play the the flute or just singing. You go outside, you play your music, you feel connected for a little while. That's what I think. That's the only thing we can do right now, besides having a lot of Skypes and a lot of Hangouts and a lot of. Another thing that I'm starting to be really impressed is that I've been talking to people in this past week. I've had people on the phone that I haven't spoken with for ever, like in 2, 3 years. And suddenly you get a message, hey, how are you? And you pick the phone and you call them because, I don't know, you like to feel this connection when times are not right. And this is not right for sure.
You're right, Christina. And I've heard that a lot and experienced that a lot. And I want to pivot to a friend that we do hear from more often, Jay, our executive director of TEDx. I know you want to jump in. Please share with us.
Yeah. Hi. Can you hear me and see me? Can you hear me and see me? You
Yes.
can. Okay, great. Thank you, Randy, for the question, and Christina. These are incredible stories, and I just wanted to quickly respond to both. When it comes to community activations, there's a lot of things happening spontaneously, and I know TEDx organizers are really creative when you could bring people in a room. Some of the activations and the things that in our community we've seen people imagine to create connection in a room setting, in a gathering, has been things we've not seen anywhere. It would be interesting to think through this time, kind of following up on Dave's point about community leadership. What are some of the things that we can start, and by connecting to our community, imagine new things as well? Randy, you asked the question of, are things going to change? Are we going to become less divisive? The hope is yes. We're certainly beginning to see it here. I listened to a podcast yesterday. Here, the governor of the state of New York and the president of the United States have been basically screaming at each other for the last 3 years and barely talking. They just made a truce and agreed to collaborate. So hopefully people will realize, like, at every level of society, this is time to collaborate and not be divided. But like Dave said, we almost don't know what's gonna happen on the other side. We just know this is a time for incredible change and incredible opportunity. So divisiveness hopefully goes away. People realize that good governance is really important, and that we should really pay attention to who are we electing and on what basis we're electing them. Not on like how much we like them and think they're funny and cool, but like the fact that they have skills to manage it. People are going to pay more attention to global institutions and global collaboration. I'm hoping that people will realize, all of us across something that TEDxers know really well, we are all connected. We are one human race. We are, everything about kind of the human global spirit, we hope will come across. And then in business too, like what's going to happen with retail? Like traditional retail has been on the brink of big trouble. Right now, it could be like its final moment, and e-commerce is exploding. What is the world going to look like afterward? Video conferencing, like we could see the complete new rebirth of convening. Like you may all be soon considering, should I do a virtual or should I do a physical conference? So all I'm saying is that there's so much unknown. If we're all going to be sitting at home for 6 months, everything is on the table for reinvention. And as what I do and all of us at TED are, and I would just welcome everybody to do the same as leaders, because all of you are leaders, is to think about what role can I play and how can I seize this moment to do something different, to participate in the change, because things can change in different directions. So that's a long way to say, who knows? But with change comes a lot of opportunity. I just wanted to jump in and share that. Thank you, Caroline.
No, I love that. And it inspired me because I think there's a really clear connection here between being united versus being divided and the spread of misinformation. Someone in the chat talked about the idea that often in times of duress and fear, we retract and go into more homogenous circles, but they said that they've actually been seeing a lot of connection among all different kinds of groups of people. I'm looking for the person who said that, but it was a really poetic point. And I think when we retract into homogenous groups, that's when misinformation prevails. So Dave, I have this question for you from Herbert, which is along those lines. How do you avoid being pulled into that frenzy of emotions during an avalanche of misinformation? That's Herbert from TEDx PSU. How do we avoid that impulse, especially when we are isolated, to become even more isolated out of fear and stay connected and stay spreading information together?
Yeah, sure. So, one of the key things about misinformation and disinformation is that it's designed to play on our emotions, and it's designed to make us react to things. And so, a lot of times when you design that kind of information, you actually think about who's going to be the most reactive to this, and you target their psyche in this sense. And so, getting this sort of 10,000-foot view of like, okay, this information is not to be really taken at face value. It should be looked at as a kind of weapon. It's almost like an unexploded munition you happen to find in your backyard or something. Like, okay, well, I got this bomb here. What do I do with it? So you should be thinking about, ways to take it to the bomb disposal squad, which is, why we've, started to focus more on sort of the forensics of disinformation and, being able to report things to a central place. So that's something that we're going to be, setting up in the next few days. We already have a team set up, to look at that, at Atlantic Council. And so, if you have the ability to kind of spot that stuff, as you see it, then you can kind of feel like you've done something about it rather than try to react to it. One of the trap with a lot of this kind of stuff is that if you try to react to it based on, the content of the information, like say you try to debunk it, say that's not true, or, take issue with it, then you're kind of trapped in the game that they set for you. And, it may be impossible to debunk a piece of information. So you may just need to just step away. You can say sometimes things like, this is disinformation, please don't share it. And you oftentimes don't need to say more than that, because it turns out in the research that's been done on this topic, public correction on social media actually can be a very powerful normative force for getting people to kind of shift their attitudes around sharing that information. So if somebody says something and they're called out for it, and not in an angry way, I think polite but firm is always kind of what I advise people, is to politely but firmly correct people and say, this is disinformation. Then other people are going to say, yeah, that's really bogus info, please don't share it. You get a little, not so much of a pile-on, but you get that affirmation of people saying, look, this really isn't good to share. And so the next time that person goes to share bad information, assuming that they're not acting in bad faith initially, they'll be a little bit more thoughtful about, what they're sharing. And in terms of, this particular situation where we have this virus, one of the things that I was doing in a lot of my talks last year was talking about how polarization, kind of stays in place until you get something like what sociologists call a superordinate goal. And what that basically means is something that unites us all in a sort of common way against an enemy. You might argue that something like climate should have been that thing. And I always joke that, in lieu of climate not being that right now, we needed aliens to come, attack, and then all of Earth would be united against the aliens. Well, this little virus is, pound for pound doing more to transform the world than maybe anything we've ever seen, or certainly in our lifetimes. I feel like that it might be that superordinate goal that sociologists have, talked about and theorized about, and maybe there's an opportunity now for us to, truly come together, at least for a while, because it almost seems to never last. But I think if we could use this as an opportunity to be more resilient, we could be in a better place. So.
That's beautiful, Dave. And of course, I completely agree with you. A couple of quick answers to questions. I'm just going to run through them quickly because we're almost out of time. Ross McMillan, yes, we are going to post the full recording on the TEDx Hub, so not to worry that you were late. Lisa Weiner of TEDx Youth at St. Andrews, you asked a really pertinent question. Will we be talking about how to do a different TEDx event, like a virtual event? And then Jamie Elderhart from TEDx Cincinnati had some great ideas. We are going to do a full hangout on this in the coming weeks, so we'll be able to dive into a full discussion on virtual events and all of your ideas from the community. We also encourage you to continue to post. We've seen a lot of great ideas on the Hub and a forum about this as well. And then one other point, Cheryl Dowell of TEDx Ottawa, you posted about looking to host your first TED Circle. Fantastic. We're also doing a hangout on this in the next couple of weeks, so please look out for that, and we'll go deep into ideas on TED Circles, virtual and alternative formats. Arthur, I believe that you have audio now, and we'd love to hear your ideas. Are you able to hop on?
Yes. Can anybody hear me now? Yes. So the good news is I feel like I'm in like the Justice League of the world, and I'm surrounded by like 1,000 superheroes. So this is kind of cool. I have a different take on things. I am more on the optimistic side. I'm not the expert on the information, so I'm so glad, Dave, that you're doing this and leading this misinformation. I limit my news intake. I try to look at the positive side of things. But what I'm doing with my team is that we have an obligation at our yearly event is to get people engaged. It's the classic thing we tell the audience. The speakers are really, it's not what it's about. It's not about the speakers. It's about the attendees, the participants. And it's to get people out of their pattern of going to work, coming home, going to work without, to share ideas, to keep people engaged. And my fear is that I'm just seeing a lot of people, and I got caught in this trap, is with all this misinformation and even real information, the new pattern for people is just to keep going in a cycle, looking at the news, watching the news, internalizing. And it's a spiral downward. So for my team, it's like, what's our obligation is to get people socially engaged. And this relates to the mental health Dave Troy talked about. So we started a quick brainstorm session of how do we keep people, and it's not like an optimistic view of everything. It's how do we just keep people socially engaged, keep people sane. I'm looking, 2 weeks down the road, that's when it's going to really start hitting. People are like, wait, what if I'm elderly? What if I'm alone by myself in a condo and my window doesn't open? And so we started a brainstorm session of like, how can we how do we as TEDx organizers and leaders start to be the group that kind of puts together ideas for engagement? And people already had ideas of like, hey, how about they reopen the drive-through? They can show talks where everybody's quarantined in their own car, but you can still see people. Somebody in a neighborhood already had a St. Patrick's Day parade where people put little signs in front of their house and people could walk by for social distancing. And like all the stories you guys are sharing tonight, there's a lot of neat things happening, but I think it's part of our duty to help to propagate that, because I think a lot of people are so stuck in this pattern of just watching the news and worry. No, we still have that human connection. I think a lot of people just need that push. And for me, I'm not sure how we do that. Maybe it's just we start off with some giant database and we just share what's working and then go from there, because I'm seeing so many incredible things. I'm really seeing a lot of a year. And one thing I always tell myself, a year from now, we're going to be in a much better place. That's my optimistic view. And every single death I hear about, I know that there's 1,000 people plus people here doing something about it. I'm looking at it like all the opportunity we have here to make a difference, to change the world. It's really exciting to seeing people come together and doing things. I don't even know what I'm saying right now. I'm on a little rant, but there's so much wonderful things that can come out of this, and I think that we can be the people spreading the seeds. Just like when you do your first TEDx event, people come in, they're like, oh my gosh, I've been waiting for this. I think we can kind of get people socially connected virtually with some crazy ideas, and they're going to do the same thing. They're going to go, oh my God, I've been waiting for somebody to show me that we could actually still be connected. I can get out of this rut that I'm in. So that's what I wanted to cover, of how we can start sharing ideas and best practices and go from there. I saw a live stream concert in Boston, and I saw from Dropkick Murphys, complete live stream, 130,000 people. And it was just like a hangout like this, with people chatting all over the world, supporting each other. And I saw other TEDx organizers. I started talking, Matt Kane from TEDx J&J. We started talking back and forth. And it was really, for a short period of time, it was a distraction, but it was a nice connection that we're all connected. And I think that we could really scale that and really come up with some really great ideas. That's my piece. So thank you.
That's great, Arthur. I think so too. That's fantastic. Dimitri Gunn, you typed in a question about how TEDxers can support their team members. I thought it was really important. I know we just have a minute, but can you go ahead and pose it to the group, and maybe we can continue the conversation in the Facebook or the Hub or at our next Hangout, but I want you to say it.
Sure. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. I just wanted to pose the question, and I'm tremendously excited of all of you taking time out and all the rest of it. It's just, I think we also shouldn't get lost. I think Arthur's saying really positive things. Don't get stuck in that trap, but also simultaneously, without our core team members, we can't positively influence anything. And so I think a lot of the discussion has been about, disinformation. Do you postpone? Do you reschedule? Do you explore virtual? Do you do circles? All of that, though, is entirely dependent on your core team. And the thing that I haven't noticed a lot of discussion around recently, and we're living in crazy times, is the care, feeding, nurturing of your core team. At TEDx Cambridge, we have now a weekly standing sort of Zoom video lunch to kind of stay in touch while everyone, email and Slack is great, but we lose, this is special. And I just want to highlight or see what other people are doing around the world. What are we doing to nourish and strengthen our core team? Because without that, we're essentially just a single person with a license to do good in the world, but we absolutely require and need those people. So I just don't want us to get lost exclusively focusing on external elements and positively influencing our broader community. But it all starts with those 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 people that live, breathe, sleep and die for our respective events. How do we surface things that are working well and looking after them? So that's it.
Thank you, Dimitri. And since we're at 11 o'clock, I'm going to keep it on time because I want all of you to keep coming back and know that we'll stick to our schedule. I know you have so many other commitments, and we are so grateful and humbled for all of you being here. There's one other sweet question that I want to just end with. Herbert from TEDx PSU asked, what about a TEDx talk from a balcony? And I just want to say, listen, if you can make it work, we are excited to see your innovations. This is a time for innovation. I mean, we'd like to see some balconies. We need it. So by all means, yes. We are also very excited to say that our fact-checking guide is coming extremely soon. Maybe as early as tomorrow. You'll see it soon. We'll share it on the TEDx Hub. So please look out for that. Please keep this conversation going, this specific one about misinformation, about credible and good information in your communities, on the TEDx Hub, on the Facebook, and with each other. And then please come back. We're going to have another Hangout very soon. We'll have one on circles. We'll have one on virtual events. And we want to hear from you what topics you want to talk about most so we can cover them. Thank you all so much. Looking forward to seeing you again soon. We'll miss you till we see you next, but it'll be in a few days. Have a wonderful night. See you later.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.